Hey guys, it's Miss Julie here. Hey, I thought we would follow up from our little study last week about Holy Week. So last Sunday was Easter Sunday, and we all know that's like an exciting time for everybody because that means that Jesus actually arose from the dead and he lives and he is alive now. So that's what our lesson is about this week. Jesus is alive. Woo! So if you remember, Jesus was, after he died on the cross, his body was placed in a tomb, which people think looks kind of like this one maybe, sort of a stone tomb or even a cave, but it had some kind of a stone that was used as a door that went and covered the opening to the tomb. And so it was on Good Friday, the Friday before Easter, that he died. And so they put his body inside of this tomb and put the stone in front of the opening to it. So in the Bible, it says that there were a group of women that came to visit his tomb, and this was a couple of days later, like on Easter. And what they found was that Jesus's body was no longer in the tomb. And so that's what we celebrate as Easter. Now, one of the women that came to the tomb to bring some spices to put on his body as kind of it was a burial ritual. One of those ladies was Mary Magdalene, who was a friend of Jesus. And so in the book of John, in chapter 20, and really starting with like the first verse, but going through, we're kind of looking at verses 11 through 18 here and what happened with Mary, and boy was she really surprised, and so kind of shocking. So let's see what happened. It says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying, and as she wept," remember she was looking for Jesus's body and she expected it to be there, but it wasn't. So she was upset because she's thinking, who took his body? So as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus's body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus, standing right there, but she didn't recognize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you're looking for?" Thinking that he was the gardener. Isn't that funny to think about? She thought Jesus was the gardener, like the caretaker of this, burial place. She said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." So he's calling her by name. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic. So that's the language that she spoke, kind of like English or Spanish or French or whatever. And she called him a name which means teacher. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it looks like Rabboni. They used to call Jesus Rabbi, which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. So that's quite a story in itself, right? She goes to the tomb, expecting to find Jesus' body, doesn't find his body there and starts to get upset and cry. And then angels appear to her and say, "Hey, why are you crying?" And then Jesus shows up and she doesn't even recognize who he is. But then when he speaks her name, Mary, she knows who he is. And he says, "Hey, go tell those disciple guys that I'm still here. I'm not dead. I'm alive." So what do you think she does? Yeah, she runs off to find the disciples, right? Yeah. Okay, so eventually Jesus catches up with the disciples himself. So he goes to where they are. Well, most of them are. There's one of them that's not there at the time, right? So he shows up and lets the disciples see, hey, everybody, I'm alive here. All right, this what I'm going to read here is found also in the New Testament, but it's in another gospel called Luke. So this is from Luke chapter 24. So here Jesus is showing up where the disciples are. And it says, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. Well, wouldn't you too? You think that Jesus has passed away, right? And then somebody shows up and, sounds like Jesus and kind of looks like Jesus, and they're like, "Whoa, it's a ghost." He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have." So when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. Now, why do you think that he did that? Well, I don't know if you can see in the picture there, but Jesus, he was nailed to the cross. So they nailed him through his hands and feet, and also his side. So he has holes in his hands still, and so he's they're looking at him, and this is kind of proof to them that, oh, this really is Jesus. Wow, crazy. And while they still did not believe it, because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" Isn't that funny? You think they're thinking he's a ghost, and then he's asking them for something to eat. A ghost, I don't really think of ghosts eating stuff, do you? No, it's more like people who are alive and who are hungry, yeah. So they gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence. So he's showing them hey, man, I'm still alive. I'm still one of you. I'm still eating food here. I'm kind of hungry. It's been a few days since I ate. So I just think that it's kind of funny. I can see myself having the same kind of reaction, what's going on? It's a ghost. But then, nope, he's eating food just like we do. Okay, now the deal is there was one disciple who wasn't present when Jesus talked to the other disciples, and his name was Thomas. Have you ever heard of Doubting Thomas before? Well, Thomas was a disciple, and so he didn't believe it that Jesus had appeared to the other disciples. He just wasn't going to take them at their word, right? So here again we look at this encounter that Thomas had with Jesus. And this is from the Gospel of John in the New Testament, chapter 20. So now Thomas, who was also known as Didymus, he was one of the 12 disciples they're talking about. He was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. Well, so that's where he gets the name Doubting Thomas, right? He didn't believe that they had actually seen Jesus. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." And you see there in the picture that there's Thomas, and he's poking poor Jesus in the side there where he had been, like tortured and everything. So now Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So it took Thomas to actually see Jesus himself in person to believe that Jesus was alive. We have never seen Jesus. So we're like that last verse that I read there, blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That's us. That's all of us. None of us have seen Jesus in person like the disciples did, but we still believe that Jesus came here. God put him here on earth, and he was a person just like we are. He wandered around in the earth. He did chores. He probably played games. He loved kids. He helped all kinds of people, and he loved everybody. That's one of the things I love the most about Jesus, is that he didn't really care, if you were like the best person in the world, in society. He loved everybody, right? Even the people that society had kind of rejected. He loved us all. And so we haven't seen him ourselves in person, but we believe that he lived, and he still lives and loves all of us. So that's a pretty cool story, don't you think? I think so. So Jesus appeared to various people several times after he had died on the cross and before he went up to heaven to stay with God. So more on that at another date. All right, so I just want to end today with a little prayer. Maybe you see crosses sometimes, and they have like a cloth draped across them like this one does. And people like to say on Easter, "He is risen." And then people will say back to you, "He is risen indeed." Hallelujah. Pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, did you notice that Jesus, when he was talking to the disciples, said, "Peace be with you"? And if you come to church, that's a part of our church service, is we say that to each other, "Peace be with you." Yeah. All right. Well, let's say the prayer together here. Dear God, thank you for sending Jesus to die for us on the cross. Thank you for raising Jesus from the dead. Thank you that Jesus is alive again. Help us to always believe that Jesus is alive. Amen. All right. I hope you guys have a great week, and, work hard on the school stuff, but also take some breaks and have some fun, play some games, get some good sleep. I'll be working here at my house too. All right. And remember, you're always in my prayers, and I'll talk to you guys soon. All right. See you later. Bye-bye.